After seeing countless world-level primordial lifeforms being annihilated by Luo Feng, the Infinite Snake Ancestor took the initiative to intervene and stop him. The Infinite Snake Ancestor was confident that, with the support of the infinite world, it could enter a state of complete void transformation. In this absolute void state, no material energy could harm it, although it would also be unable to harm its opponent. This unique ability, originating from the mysterious infinite world, made the Infinite Snake Ancestor fearless in its battle against Luo Feng. The battle immediately attracted the attention of the entire infinite primordial space because the Cultivator camp and the innate primordial camp had been mortal enemies for countless years. In the land of origin, the seven lords, Yuan, Jin, Wulin, Ming Huang, Nai Ji Yu, Starlight, and Mo Man, also watched closely, especially because they believed Luo Feng would soon grasp his second primordial level Dao. At the beginning of the battle, Luo Feng unleashed over 100 terrifying blade attacks, but the Infinite Snake Ancestor easily evaded them through its extraordinary mastery of the void. It was considered second only to Starlight in terms of void control, and it could merge with the void maze formed by Luo Feng's destroyer world, disappearing and appearing at will. However, Luo Feng soon changed his blade technique. Although the power of each blade was greatly reduced, every blade possessed a strange spirituality and followed precise trajectories through layers of spacetime barriers. This allowed Luo Feng to achieve an absolute hit, making it impossible for the Infinite Snake Ancestor to evade his attacks. The enormous number of blade lights rapidly depleted the Infinite Snake Ancestor's body, forcing it to rely on the energy supply of the destroyer world to maintain its peak condition. Unwilling to continue relying on such an abundant external energy source, the Infinite Snake Ancestor activated its absolute void transformation. When Luo Feng's countless blade lights struck it, all the attacks were completely nullified, causing no damage whatsoever. The observers realized that although Luo Feng could hit the Infinite Snake Ancestor, merely hitting it was useless. Luo Feng continued testing his techniques and even deployed a terrifying blade formation composed of 15 powerful blade lights that swept through every corner of the destroyer world. Yet the Infinite Snake Ancestor, protected by absolute void, remained unharmed and occasionally launched stealth attacks of its own. Luo Feng gradually realized that while absolute hit could threaten most ancestors, some opponents possessed abilities that made being hit meaningless. Through this battle, he continued refining his primordial blade path. Then Luo Feng suddenly changed his attack. When he swung his blade, no visible blade light appeared. The absolutely void Infinite Snake Ancestor suddenly noticed that several of its scales had silently vanished. Luo Feng immediately realized that his life-severing technique was effective. This technique did not cut the opponent's physical body or soul, instead, it directly severed vitality. After mastering the primordial life and death Dao, Luo Feng could now use this method to attack life force itself. He unleashed hundreds of invisible life-severing blade lights, causing more and more scales and even parts of the Infinite Snake Ancestor's muscles to disappear. The Infinite Snake Ancestor became alarmed because even while hiding inside the void maze and using absolute void, it was still being injured. This shocking scene caused many ancestors to realize that they could no longer casually confront Luo Feng with their true bodies. Although they possessed powerful vitality and numerous life-saving techniques, Luo Feng's current methods were too dangerous. If they miscalculated, they could face complete death. Luo Feng also gained a deeper understanding of his own cultivation. He had previously centered his primordial blade path around the Great Destruction system because of the power of origin Great Destruction. However, he realized that he had underestimated the importance of life cutting. When he had first become a lord, his killing methods had been relatively weak, and life cutting had only been useful against weaker world-level primordial life forms. But as his primordial blade path gradually became more complete, the power of life cutting increased dramatically, revealing its terrifying nature. Life cutting was essentially an unavoidable technique. Neither omnipresence nor absolute void could completely escape it. As long as the opponent possessed life, there was a possibility of being affected. Luo Feng understood that the technique operated through life force transmission. Life force sensing served as a passageway through which blade light could be transmitted. Although the passageway had an energy limit determined by Luo Feng's mastery of life force, since his achievements in the study of life had already reached the highest level in the endless primordial space, This energy limit could no longer be increased. Therefore, Luo Feng decided to improve the technique by increasing its striking speed, refining his blade technique, and continuously enhancing its power. Once his blade path reached perfection, the power of life cutting would rise even further. While fighting the infinite snake ancestor, Luo Feng continuously experimented with different variations of his blade technique. The battle provided him with an ideal opponent for testing his theories and perfecting his techniques. The Golden Lord, Jin, was astonished that Luo Feng could injure the infinite snake ancestor while it was in absolute void. He quickly realized that Luo Feng was using life force itself as the medium to transmit blade light. But he could not understand how life force could actually be cut. The Blood Lord, who possessed profound achievements in life force through blood power, was equally shocked. He understood that life force sensing could transmit only a tiny amount of energy, which might severely injure a world-level primordial life form but would normally be insignificant against an ancestor of the same level. The deeper one's understanding of life became, the more incomprehensible Luo Feng's life-cutting technique appeared. Starlight recognized that the combination of Luo Feng's two primordial-level Daos, life and destruction, was beginning to reveal its terrifying power. These two Daos complemented each other perfectly, making Luo Feng exceptionally proficient at destroying life. Having observed countless future timelines, Starlight had long believed that Luo Feng would become the most terrifying existence in future battles and the central figure on the Cultivator camp's front battlefield. His blade would become the sharpest weapon of the entire Cultivator camp, capable of cutting through every obstacle. Starlight could also see that Luo Feng's second Dao was gradually taking shape and that his primordial blade path was approaching completion. As the battle continued, all of Luo Feng's other methods proved incapable of threatening the infinite snake ancestor. Only life cutting, transmitted through life force sensing, remained effective. Luo Feng repeatedly used it while the infinite snake ancestor relied on the power of the infinite world to desperately defend itself and even attempted to conceal its life force. However, the battle gradually became less challenging for Luo Feng because he had completely familiarized himself with the infinite snake ancestor's evasive abilities. At that point, the infinite snake ancestor no longer provided him with much opportunity for improvement. Luo Feng then demanded that the infinite snake ancestor release the world envoys. The infinite snake ancestor mocked him, believing that although life-cutting could continuously dissolve its body, the energy supply of the destruction world allowed it to maintain its peak state. Luo Feng responded by transforming into a terrifying blade light and charging directly toward the core of the destruction world's source. If the infinite snake ancestor refused to cooperate, Luo Feng intended to seize that layer of the destruction world himself. Seeing this, the infinite snake ancestor finally gave in, although it was unwilling to admit defeat. It recognized that losing to Luo Feng was not disgraceful and that even Shiao Joe might not be stronger than him. 100 world envoys then appeared before Luo Feng, each burning with blue flames, and collectively attacked him. However, after exchanging blows with them for only a few breaths, Luo Feng used the insights he had gained from the Mountain of Destruction to verify his understanding in actual combat, rendering the world envoys ineffective. At the 22nd level of the Abyss of Destruction, Luo Feng arrived at the shattered and distorted destruction world, where endless energy flows revolved around the peculiar cube known as Demon Ruins. Demon Ruins was born with near supreme level close-range destructive power and was virtually indestructible. But his weak movement technique limited him to the 22nd level. Unlike the infinite snake ancestor, Luo Feng had no enmity with Demon Ruins and agreed to fight him one-on-one. Demon Ruins eagerly charged forward, wanting a direct confrontation, and Luo Feng stood still, curious to experience the destructive power of an existence considered near supreme level. Demon Ruins' sharpest point pierced through Luo Feng's protective energy layer, which was formed from 1,080,000,000 origin energies and strengthened by the primordial life and death Dao and the blood crane territory. The point also pierced Luo Feng's blood-red robe and entered his body. Its destructive power was astonishing, surpassing the theoretical limits of the endless primordial space and exceeding the combined destructive power of dozens of ancestors at a single point. However, its fatal weakness was that the point was smaller than the theoretical limits of the endless primordial space. Because Luo Feng's body was enormous, approximately one-third the size of a normal source world, and had no critical points, The damage caused by the attack was minimal, and he instantly recovered the lost energy. Demon Ruins was delighted that Luo Feng was willing to fight him head-on. While Luo Feng rapidly comprehended the principles behind Demon Ruins' breaking point strike, he realized that the sharp point was not matter or energy, but a rule formed from the interweaving mysteries of the extreme point and destruction rules. Demon Ruins' natural gift possessed terrifying destructive power and also granted him immortality. But its extreme perfection made further improvement extremely difficult. During their repeated clashes, Demon Ruins thought about the evolution path suggested by Kafu, splitting himself into 125 smaller bodies to evolve toward a form similar to the fourth sculpture. However, he had already tried this and found that each sub-body became too weak, causing his overall strength to decline. And he still did not understand how to evolve successfully. Through repeated confrontations, Luo Feng, who had already mastered the power of breaking and accumulated profound experience in the primordial blade path, finally grasped the sharp aspect of destruction. Although he could not fully comprehend Demon Ruins' innate technique, this insight allowed him to experiment with new techniques in his primordial blade path. Demon Ruins later summoned 90 world envoys to attack Luo Feng together. But they were still unable to defeat him, and Luo Feng easily broke through them with his blade formation. When Demon Ruins suddenly fell into a daze, Luo Feng did not disturb him and proceeded to the 23rd level. The 23rd, 24th, and 25th levels were areas that Yuan, the Ice Peak Ancestor, the Infinite Snake Ancestor, and Demon Ruins had been unable to conquer. Yet Luo Feng passed through all three levels with ease while continuing to hone his blade technique. Eventually reaching the 26th level where the Starlight Lord resided, Luo Feng temporarily stayed there without fighting Starlight, disappointing many watching ancestors. Later, in the Land of Origin, Yuan, Jin, Wulin, Ming Huang, Nai Ji Yu, Starlight, and Mo Man gathered to meet Luo Feng and offered to spar with him one after another. The lords understood that Luo Feng had become a lord through the primordial life and death Dao focused on life, making the destruction-focused path the most suitable second primordial level path for him. Mo Man volunteered to fight first, and Luo Feng accepted all their challenges, maintaining only 10% of their energy reserves. Luo Feng fought the 7 lords one by one, although the other lords possessed far less energy than him. Each surpassed him in their own areas of expertise because they had mastered at least one primordial level Dao. These battles exposed Luo Feng to different primordial Daos and tested his primordial blade path from various perspectives, greatly deepening his understanding and allowing him to clearly determine the direction he wanted to pursue. Back on the 26th level, Starlight Lord told Luo Feng that he should now be capable of establishing the primordial blade path. Luo Feng acknowledged that he could establish it at any time, as his battles with the 7 lords had already created a powerful urge to do so. However, he still had one final battle to complete. He intended to fight Shiao Joe, whose destructive and breaking power was the most terrifying, and believed that after this battle would be the perfect time to establish the primordial blade path. Luo Feng then set off toward the 27th level, while more than 200 ancestor level and lord level beings throughout the endless primordial space pierced through spacetime to watch the battle. Unwilling to miss his confrontation with Shiao Joe, on the 27th layer of the Abyss of Destruction, the ground was formed from vast expanses of colorful crystal. A woman in a gray robe stood calmly upon it. The winds of this layer were powerful enough to obliterate world-level primordial life. Yet they could not even move a single strand of her hair. Her gaze pierced through the barriers of time and space and focused on Luo Feng, who was still on a higher layer. She had been waiting for this battle for a very long time. Luo Feng eventually descended to the 27th layer of the destruction world. His black hair hung over a blood-colored robe, and Shiao Joe greeted him with a slight smile that possessed a strange allure. At that moment, countless forces throughout the endless primordial space, including many extremely secretive existences, were observing the confrontation. Yuan watched Shiao Joe with particular emotion. Shiao Joe was extremely reclusive and devoted herself entirely to pursuing the path of the strongest. Because of this, she rarely smiled. In Yuan's memories, he had seen her smile only a very limited number of times. After the Cultivator camp and the Ice Peak camp separated, Yuan and Shiao Joe also rarely acted together. Starlight explained that among the many ancestors, Shiao Joe possessed the highest level of destruction talent. By relying on two highest level powers, she could unleash astonishing destructive might. The Ice Peak Ancestor, Infinite Snake Ancestor, Kafu, Feather Emperor, Demon Ruins, and others had also mastered the two highest level powers, making their combinations extremely powerful. And some of them had even mastered the mysterious land. However, Shiao Joe was uniquely powerful among the ancestors. Starlight admitted that, in terms of pure destruction and destructive power, he was still inferior to Shiao Joe. He could only match her through the use of various different methods. Yuan also believed that Shiao Joe was exceptionally pure in her pursuit of the strongest path. Among all the ancestors, if anyone had the greatest possibility of comprehending a primordial level Tao, he believed that Shiao Joe possessed the greatest potential. The Ice Peak Ancestor also watched the battle from afar. Long ago, before he established the Ice Peak camp, his strength had been much weaker than it was now. At that time, he and Shiao Joe had traveled through the endless primordial space together and explored several mysterious lands. Shiao Joe had once protected and cared for him. After the Ice Peak Ancestor reached the undying and undying level, Shiao Joe gradually began to let go of many things. Since becoming invincible, she had never suffered a defeat. Because of this, the Ice Peak Ancestor believed that Shiao Joe would win, even though he acknowledged that Luo Feng possessed extremely high talent. On the crystal land of the 27th layer, Luo Feng and Shiao Joe finally faced each other directly. Shiao Joe said that she had waited for him for a long time and urged him to use all his strength. Luo Feng's battle intent was equally intense, and he told Shiao Joe to give her all as well. At this point, Luo Feng was already capable of opening up the primordial blade path at any moment. Nevertheless, he deliberately chose to fight Shiao Joe first because he wanted to experience the true strength of the longest undefeated expert in the endless primordial space. At Luo Feng's current realm, finding an opponent who could truly match him was extremely rare. And Shiao Joe was exactly the kind of opponent he had been seeking. Shiao Joe then warned Luo Feng to be careful. As soon as her words fell, her gray-robed body naturally dissipated and transformed into an endless sea of flames. The flames spread throughout the entire 27th layer of the destruction world in an instant. The crystal land of this layer was extremely extraordinary. But under the pervasive flames, even it began to melt. The crystalline ground transformed into colorful flowing liquid, while large amounts of colorful mist rose from it and blended into the endless flames. The flames themselves were ashen white, possessing the terrifying ability to burn and destroy everything. Luo Feng stood within the endless flames, relying on his protective energy layer to resist their invasion. He watched as the land melted and flowed, realizing that the crystal ground had probably already melted and solidified countless times throughout the history of this place. Shiao Joe then declared that fire was the root and destruction was the fruit. Within the endless flames, a black flame suddenly condensed. The moment this black flame appeared, it began burning Luo Feng simultaneously from the outside and from within his body. In an instant, the endless flames covering the entire destruction world transformed into black flames. They surrounded Luo Feng and burned both his body and its interior. Seemingly ignoring all of his defenses, Luo Feng immediately realized that his energy reserve was being consumed at an astonishing rate. Approximately 1/10 of his total energy was being burned away with every breath. The destructive power of this technique was therefore extremely terrifying. Shiao Joe explained that she already knew Luo Feng possessed the power of life. So she had specifically created a technique called life burning for this battle. However, even this technique still could not truly threaten Luo Feng. Shiao Joe then announced that she would use the killing move she had the greatest confidence in. She would burn her own true body in order to unleash her strongest attack. Luo Feng did not panic or retreat. Instead, he stood there calmly and patiently, eager to witness the full power of Shiao Joe's ultimate attack and see how terrifying the strongest strike of this undefeated expert truly was. In the innate primordial camp, the 9 emperors discussed Luo Feng's battle with Shiao Joe. After fully mastering the primordial blade path, Luo Feng combined 2 primordial level Daos into a terrifying blade strike that pierced through 3 layers of the abyss of destruction. The Infinite Snake Ancestor stated that Luo Feng's offensive power had surpassed both Starlight and Shiao Joe and had reached the highest level of the entire endless primordial space, giving him the potential to kill an ancestor one-on-one. However, The mother of space-time explained that ancestors who had survived until now possessed extremely powerful life preservation methods. Even ordinary ancestors such as the Blood Lord, Crane Lord, and Shadow Lord were difficult to kill because of their blood power, undying power, and shadow power. More powerful ancestors, such as the Lotus Prison Mountain Master, could even withstand the combined attacks of all 8 cultivator camp lords and merely be forced into a disordered retreat. Ancestors with serious weaknesses in life preservation were extremely rare because they were usually eliminated during the long conflicts between various forces. The Mother of Spacetime revealed that although she had never seen a future in which Luo Feng killed an ancestor alone, she had seen future possibilities where Luo Feng joined forces with Starlight or Yuan to kill one. Luo Feng, Starlight, Yuan, and Mo Man could completely conceal themselves because they had mastered primordial level Daos, making them impossible for beings of the same level to detect. Previously, a combined attack by Starlight, Yuan, and Mo Man could not quickly kill an ancestor because the infinite snake ancestor could immediately descend through the infinite world to provide support. However, Luo Feng's offensive power had now become so terrifying that he could destroy most of an ancestor's power by himself, allowing Starlight or Yuan to pursue and kill the remaining power. Therefore, the rise of Luo Feng marked the beginning of a new era in which the fall of ancestors would become much easier. The 9 emperors realized that their strategy against the cultivator camp had to change. The infinite snake ancestor urged the giant god emperor to ensure that the giant god race participated in future wars, warning that the camp's resources would decline if it weakened. The giant god race possessed more than 10 ancestors, along with numerous world-level and high-level primordial life races, making it the second largest race in the camp and a major consumer of resources. The initial suggested that future wars should prioritize survival, with killing becoming secondary. The Mother of Spacetime agreed, explaining that previous battle arrays had focused heavily on killing enemies and had sometimes sacrificed 1 or 2 ancestors to eliminate weaker members. From now on, battle arrays needed to use ancestors with powerful defensive and life-preserving abilities as their core, including those who had mastered the highest levels of life power, defense power, water power, earth power, power of the world, power of matter, and domain power. This would make the battle formations extremely difficult to break. An ordinary cultivator lord could generally match 2 or 3 ancestors working together. In the past, 7 cultivator lords had united and relied on Yuan's formations, Starlight's observations of countless future possibilities, and their coordinated Daos, using defense as their primary strategy. Yet they had still suffered repeated failures and lost territories one after another. After Luo Feng became a lord, the giant god emperor and 2 companions directly captured him, while the infinite snake ancestor trapped Wulin. However, Luo Feng's origin great destruction caused enough damage and fear among some ancestors that they decided it was not worth risking their lives against the undying and eternal cultivator lords merely for 3,600 world groups, eventually leading to a ceasefire. The silent extinction ancestor warned that if the safety of ancestors could not be guaranteed, many weaker ancestors might refuse to participate in the war. Even the first major camp, which occupied half of the endless primordial space, was now forced to prioritize survival when arranging its battle formations. The infinite snake ancestor stated that the cultivator camp had already established its foundation and would surpass the Ice Peak camp to become the greatest enemy of the innate primordial camp. Although the Ice Peak camp possessed 12 undying and eternal beings and another 26 ancestors, the cultivator camp was now considered the greater threat because the innate primordial camp had more than 120 ancestors. The Mother of Spacetime believed that as long as the innate primordial camp valued the survival of every ancestor, the cultivator camp would find it extremely difficult to kill even one of them, allowing the innate primordial camp to remain the strongest force for countless years. The Ice Peak camp also realized that it could no longer suppress the cultivator camp after witnessing Luo Feng's blade. At that moment, the cultivator camp officially surpassed the Ice Peak camp. Meanwhile, the Blood Lord, Crane Lord, and Shadow Lord of the Blood Crane Territory clan watched the battle and were deeply alarmed by Luo Feng's power. They had an irreconcilable enmity with him because the Shadow Lord had previously led his followers to plunder the cultivator territory, after which Luo Feng forcibly refined the Blood Crane territory and seized it. Although the three ancestors possessed strong life preservation abilities, the Blood Lord realized that 5 or 6 cultivator lords working together could now encircle and kill them. Therefore, they decided to join a faction. Since the innate primordial camp was the strongest faction, had repeatedly invited them, and was a mortal enemy of the cultivator camp, the three ancestors led the entire Blood Crane Territory clan to seek refuge there. Because the innate primordial camp was now building battle formations with survival as its priority. It warmly welcomed ancestors with powerful life preservation abilities such as the Blood Lord and his companions. Luo Feng himself was unaware that his blade had ushered in a new era. His overwhelming power above Shiao Joe had caused ordinary ancestors to lose their former sense of security, forcing them to act more cautiously in the future. Even the strongest innate primordial camp had changed its battle strategy to prioritize survival. After leaving the 27th layer of the Abyss of Destruction, Luo Feng arrived at the 28th layer. The combined power of 30 world envoys created terrifying barriers that Shiao Joe and Starlight had previously been unable to penetrate. However, Luo Feng's blade light was powerful enough to destroy everything, allowing him to effortlessly cut through all the world envoy barriers and leave a life imprint on the Shadow of Origin. After mastering the 28th layer, Luo Feng did not immediately continue forward. Instead, he settled there to create a complete combat technique based on his primordial blade path. At the Land of Origin, the 7 Avatar Lords smiled brightly. Starlight declared that the era had changed, because from that moment onward, the offensive and defensive positions between the two sides had completely reversed. Lord Nai Jiyu proposed that, given the cultivator camp's current strength, controlling only 3,600 world groups was no longer appropriate and that they could now command 8,000 world groups. Jin jokingly pointed out that Nai Jiyu had often warned that wars could be lost. Yet he was now the first to advocate war. Nai Jiyu explained that territory should match strength. Before Luo Feng's rise, the 7 lords had been too weak to contend with the Ice Peak camp or the innate primordial camp, causing their territories to fall one after another. Yuan added that they had only fought because the innate primordial camp had attempted to eradicate their foundation. Nai Jiyu acknowledged this but emphasized that the situation had changed because Luo Feng had mastered 2 primordial level Daos, life and destruction, making him extremely powerful in battle and roughly equal to 2 Shiao Joe. The cultivator camp's overall strength had now surpassed the Ice Peak camp and could pose a threat to the innate primordial camp. Although the innate primordial camp occupied 50% of the valuable territories in the endless primordial space and the Ice Peak camp occupied 20%, the cultivator camp controlled only 10%. Wulin pointed out that their territory contained a particularly high density of source worlds and, in terms of total source worlds, surpassed the Ice Peak camp. Yuan urged everyone not to rush into a decision, revealing that his primordial rule operation path was close to a breakthrough and that they should decide what to do after he advanced. The other lords became excited because Yuan was the most important figure to the camp as a whole. Luo Feng was currently the strongest in direct combat. Starlight excelled at flawless control of time and space. But Yuan's formations could combine the primordial level Daos of all the lords into a perfect battle array, multiplying their overall strength and allowing them to resist the massive armies of the innate primordial camp without fearing the Ice Peak camp. Yuan estimated that his breakthrough could take anywhere from tens of thousands to millions of epochs, a period considered insignificant by the lords. The others decided to wait for his breakthrough before expanding their territory, believing that their increased strength would greatly reduce resistance. Starlight observed that Luo Feng had become the strongest direct combatant in the endless primordial space and Yuan was about to break through, making everything seem perfect. However, through countless future timelines and the observations of his many avatars, Starlight knew that no new lord would appear for a very long time. The current world-level Primordial lives in the cultivator camp had no hope of becoming lords. And even the invincible beings from the braided cage brought to the initial world were far inferior to Nai Jiyu, much less Luo Feng. The 9th lord remained extremely distant. Starlight worried that the camp's growing strength and fighting spirit, along with Luo Feng's ambition after intercepting world-level primordials that devoured source worlds, might lead them to seize even more territory. But more territory would also require greater defensive strength. With only 8 lords, the amount of territory they could defend was limited. Nevertheless, Starlight felt that the existence of a powerful external enemy allowed the lords to set aside their differences and unite. And he deeply cherished this period of unity. Meanwhile, beside the origin continent origin world, within the mysterious land known as the Blood Crane territory, Luo Feng was in seclusion creating combat techniques. The territory was under his control and could prevent all probing, providing the secrecy necessary for experimentation. Luo Feng repeatedly unleashed terrifying destructive power, with some of his attacks already surpassing the power he had displayed during the camp war with Origin Great Destruction. He sought to combine his primordial life and death Dao with his primordial blade path while pursuing overwhelming destructive power rather than flexibility. The first technique he created was the Primordial Destruction Battle Technique. Based on the powerful results of his previous Origin battle technique, thanks to his greatly improved energy utilization, a single power could now produce far greater destruction. And even the destruction created through a formation containing 3.6 billion origins was comparable to the former Origin Great Destruction. After more than 300 epochs, the first primordial battle technique was perfected. It contained 9 techniques. The first 3 were commonly used lethal moves that could be performed every 1 or 2 moments, while the remaining 6 were different forbidden techniques that each erupted with 1.08 billion origins. Using a forbidden technique once would greatly reduce its power, but each one was 3 to 4 times stronger than the former Origin Great Destruction. Since Origin Great Destruction had represented the limit of power in the endless primordial space, Luo Feng's new techniques meant that he could now crush a group of ancestors with a single strike. His Origin battle technique system was specifically designed for group combat. Luo Feng then created the second technique, the life-cutting battle technique. This silent technique did not cut matter or energy, but instead directly cut the profound and mysterious vitality of living beings. Its main limitation was that the amount of energy that could be transferred through vitality was fixed. So Luo Feng could only improve the destructive power of the life-cutting itself. Although it did not appear overwhelmingly powerful, it could produce extraordinary effects at critical moments. After more than 200 eras, it was perfected. The third technique was the Shadow Blade technique. A sword technique designed to ensure that every attack would hit. Because it required precise control over its power, its destructive strength was limited, but it could strike enemies from extremely distant locations. Even enemies separated from Luo Feng by several world groups could still be attacked. Although greater distance increased the difficulty and reduced the technique's power, its enormous range made it extremely difficult for enemies to completely escape Luo Feng's pursuit. The fourth technique was the Destruction Blade technique. A close-range attack that did not focus on striking a specific target but instead annihilated everything within a certain area. After more than 900 eras of seclusion, Luo Feng had successively created the Origin battle technique, life-cutting battle technique, Shadow Blade technique, and Destruction Blade technique, and was still working on the fifth technique, the Clone battle technique, which remained incomplete and contained many flaws. At that moment, a special fluctuation appeared within the endless fluctuations of the endless primordial space. Lord Moman, who mastered the primordial fluctuation Dao, immediately sensed its extraordinary nature. Although the fluctuation was hidden among countless others and appeared ordinary, Moman recognized that the fluctuation land had finally appeared. He immediately contacted Luo Feng and told him that they needed to set out at once. Luo Feng readily agreed, as he had promised Mo Man long ago and now had a relatively complete combat technique system that was perfectly suited for testing in such a place. They arranged to meet at the mysterious land known as the Flame Mountains near the Abyss of Destruction. Luo Feng's avatar on the 28th layer of the Abyss of Destruction immediately absorbed energy and grew to the level of his main battle avatar, carrying 2 suitable weapons before setting out. During his exploration of the Abyss of Destruction, Luo Feng had accumulated 15 weapons comparable to the sky-splitting saber. Although he could exchange destruction fruits from the Mountain of Destruction for powerful weapons, he was not in a hurry and preferred to accumulate more destruction fruits in hopes of obtaining even better treasures. Using the power of the Blood Crane territory, Luo Feng reached the Flame Mountains in only 1 day. The vast flaming mountains distorted space, with energy flowing like water. 7 flame-type mysterious lands had been discovered, the strongest being the enormous fire prison wall, which stretched for roughly 100 world group lengths. The Flame Mountains were much more ordinary and were comparable to the Blood Crane territory. Luo Feng was curious because he had never heard of the fluctuation land, and even Mo Man, despite mastering the primordial fluctuation Dao, could discover it only once in roughly 100,000 eras, proving how unusual it was. Lord Mo Man soon arrived and thanked Luo Feng for coming, explaining that he had always lacked a helper like him. With Luo Feng's assistance, Mo Man could repeatedly use the forbidden techniques of his primordial fluctuation Dao and hoped to explore the fluctuation land more deeply. When Luo Feng asked where the fluctuation land was, Mo Man wrapped a strand of fluctuation around him, and the two of them vanished together.